I would never have contacted Oswald in a million years if Moore had not sanctioned it, de Mohrenschildt said. Too much was at stake. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Nell, and if you're new, then welcome. I would love to earn your subscription today with this video. Well, I have a few things to get out of the way before we get into our reading today. The first thing is I want to say a thank you to Don, who sent me this book. He offered, actually many of you have mentioned this book, and he sent it. I just got back from vacation, so I'm looking forward to getting into this. And I actually just noticed that it's signed, so that's amazing. I'm looking forward to reading it. I've heard a lot about her story, and you know, there are people on both sides, so I'm interested in hearing from her directly about what she says her story is in regard to Lee Oswald. So thank you for that, Dawn. The other thing is that Steve Cameron, an author, reached out to me last week and communicated that not only was he enjoying it, but that even some of Roger Craig's family members had seen or liked the video, which is just incredible. You know, one of the privileges that I have is getting to try to bring attention to men who are heroes, women who are heroes, those who have told the truth about this situation. And so I did not know, but Steve reached out and said, would you like some of my books? And so he sent these two. I started digging into this one last night. Thank you, Steve, so much. I'm really very interested in Roger Craig and very thankful to have a transcript of interviews with him, things he wrote. This book is all a book that Roger Craig wrote called When They Kill a President. So thank you, Steve, for that. I'm sure we'll be getting into that in future episodes. And then just personally, many of you have recommended this book. I just want you to know I'm reading it. I'm not very far in. It's very dense, but I am making my way through personally. Just to let that sink in, because this is the #1 book that you guys have recommended, and so I want to be well versed and thorough in how I'm understanding JFK as a president. I think that's the real strength of this book. If you are looking for a book about the Kennedy assassination, I'll link to this one in the show notes, because so many people mention it. It's JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas as the book that tells the big picture of why they hated Kennedy and what was happening in Kennedy's soul that made him uncontrollable and firm in certain areas that they wanted him to be bendable. So I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it. If you're interested, I'll link that in the show notes. Today, we are getting into Richard Belzer's book, Hit List. We have read from this book before. You can tell it's starting to get worn. I've taken it now on a couple of trips with me because it is so fascinating. One of the things I love about this book, this one will also be in the show notes, is that it has at the beginning 50 different personalities who were, they're asserting, on this hit list of people who had to be taken care of that were somehow related to the JFK assassination or may have been. And in each one, what they do, it's a relatively brief look at each one, but it gives you an overview. What are the reasons why people say this is associated with the JFK assassination as to why this person was then on the hit list? What were the circumstances of their experience in regard to the assassination or the events around the assassination, and then also what were the circumstances of their death, and then they make a ruling. They make their own conclusions based on the evidence they have laid out in this book. So it's a really useful book for that purpose. Today we are going to, you've seen the thumbnail, we are going to go through the life of George de Mohrenschildt. Now, the reason why I have a personal fascination with Ruth Paine, but also I have a real fascination with George de Mohrenschildt. I think he, like Jack Ruby and Ruth, is one of these people, and Lee, that when you start to scratch a little below the surface, you get some really odd connections, you get some odd behavior patterns. It doesn't make sense compared to normal people and how they make decisions. And so whenever I see that, in any story, if somebody's writing a novel, they write it in such a way that the characters' actions make sense in regard to what they want. That's something that you're trained in. I mean, I haven't released any novels that I've written, but I think I've written 3, at least 2. I was starting my 3rd when it got deleted off the hard drive. But so I've studied the craft of storytelling, and one of the things that they tell you is when you are crafting a character, you want to make sure that whatever you have them do makes sense in light of whatever the readers have been told their ultimate desires are. You can have them do bizarre things, but if it lines up with what the readers actually know is their real motive, then the readers will accept it. But if you have a character that the readers have been told he or she wants this, but you have them moving in this direction that makes no connection or comparison and makes no sense in light of that underdriving motive, then you're going to lose your readers. They're not going to understand. They might hang with you a little while, but if you do that too long or if you do that too often, your readers will go, the characters just don't make sense to me. They don't read as true, because we all know ultimately we act in line with the long-term thing we want, even if it's different than the thing we say we want. So George de Mohrenschildt, Ruth Paine, Lee Oswald, Jack Ruby, they are each people that seem to act in ways that are different than what they would ostensibly want based on what we know about their motives. George de Mohrenschildt, who is he? Where did he come from? I also want to say one other reason why he is fascinating to me. We will get into the connections that he has within the case. I think we're going to get into how he is significant. But I would say for me, the other thing that is very odd about George de Mohrenschildt is that his primary connection in this case is through Lee Oswald and Marina Oswald. But he knew Jackie Onassis as a child. She called him Uncle George. And also, he was personal friends with George H.W. Bush. That would be Bush Sr., called Poppy, the one who was president when I was roughly, 8 to 12. So he was the person that I grew up thinking of as the Republican president, because then we went through 8 years of Clinton's presidency. So he was the preeminent example until I became an adult of who I thought of as a Republican. And to find out he had a connection to this case, and a deep connection with George de Mohrenschildt, was very interesting to me. So let's get into this chapter. It is chapter 44. George de Mohrenschildt died on March 29th, 1977. The victim was George de Mohrenschildt, sometimes known as Baron de Mohrenschildt, although he actually was descended from the Baron Hillienfeld. The cause of death was a shotgun blast. The official verdict was that he took his own life. The actual circumstances was this: George de Mohrenschildt was the key link between Lee Harvey Oswald and the CIA, as well as connecting him to extremely conservative Texas oil millionaires rumored to be involved in the JFK assassination. The inconsistencies are numerous and dramatic. We will see that in the text that follows. And then at the end, we will get their assessment and conclusions. Decades after his death, the story of George de Mohrenschildt is still so explosive that Vincent Bugliosi, author of Reclaiming History, ordered the TV camera operators to immediately stop filming the second that Jesse Ventura calmly mentioned that de Mohrenschildt was part of the CIA. I went back and watched it. It's true. You can still find it on YouTube. You'll find the clip. It's true. Mr. Bugliosi is the type of author who can wipe out large portions of our forests with a 1,648-page book on the JFK assassination, yet reach the ridiculous conclusion that Oswald acted alone. Yeah, the deeper you dig, the more obvious it is. George de Mohrenschildt, descended from Russian royalty, was a sophisticated businessman. He was a CIA asset used for various tasks. One of those tasks, as Mark Lane puts it, was that he was, quote, the babysitter for Lee Harvey Oswald for the CIA. A CIA case officer named J. Walton Moore was apparently de Mohrenschildt's handler from the CIA. Jackie Kennedy, wife of John, was also very close to de Mohrenschildt. In fact, she called him Uncle George. As de Mohrenschildt himself put it, the CIA helps him win an oil contract in Turkey. He then later reports back to the CIA about everything he knows about the business people and leaders whom he met while doing business there. And he did this in multiple countries. George Herbert Bush, that would be who we were talking about, George Bush Sr., not the one who was president from 2000 to 2008, but the president who was Reagan's vice president and then ran for office himself in 1988, was president until 1992, and then lost to Clinton in 1992. That Bush, George de Mohrenschildt, was the uncle of Bush's roommate at Andover. So, Bush's roommate, let's picture it, Bush's roommate, so think of somebody that you have roomed with, either in a college or training program or that kind of thing, and then their uncle, okay, that was the connection. And also, Bush and de Mohrenschildt were members of the same clubs in Texas. In fact, Bush's phone number was found in de Mohrenschildt's address book. Bush, comma, George H.W., parentheses, Poppy, end parentheses. That's how he was entered into de Mohrenschildt's address book. And also, he had an entry for Zapata Petroleum in Midland, Texas. It was the name of Bush's oil company. And many FBI and CIA veterans have substantiated that Zapata provided help to the CIA for its anti-Castro intelligence operations. I believe there are islands that were owned by Zapata. Much work in the Gulf and Central American areas was done using the means and connections of Zapata oil. Interestingly, the Bay of Pigs was also named Operation Zapata. There are more connections from the Bay of Pigs to George Bush that perhaps we'll get into, but that is an interesting point of study. U.S. Army Brigadier General Russell Bowen wrote, "There was a cover-up of Zapata's CIA connections." Here's what he said. Bush, in fact, did work directly with the anti-Castro Cuban groups in Miami before and after the Bay of Pigs invasion, using his company, Zapata Oil, as a corporate cover for his activities on behalf of the agency. So what that is saying is that Bush was doing actions on behalf of the agency and using Zapata Oil as the cover for that. So if my real goal was to get into the local city council and to understand the way they made decisions, then perhaps I might create a business or come up with a homeowner's dispute, something through which I could embed myself in their inner workings for some length of time, so that I could have a reason to be there, a reason to understand their decision making and long-term observation of their behaviors. That's similar to what's happening here. Records at the University of Miami, where the operations were based for several years, show George Bush was present during this time. So he's saying there's outside corroboration, not only that they used this name as a cover, not only that Bush did these things, but that Bush was in Miami during these years. As far as things held in common, Bush and de Mohrenschildt also shared oil wealth and the CIA. Before he became president, Bush was director of the CIA. Did you know that? That was one of those things that we were expected to believe. They actually told us that he was the first civilian head of the CIA. They tried to pass it off as if he hadn't been in the CIA. None of that was true. He had been an agent. Before becoming the CIA director, he was involved in supporting anti-Castro intelligence operations. You should be having alarm bells go off right here, certainly, on behalf of the agency. So strong Bush connection here. Like de Mohrenschildt, the oil business was a perfect cloak for those intelligence activities. The CIA was using companies like Zapata to stage and supply secret missions attacking Fidel Castro's Cuban government. The CIA code name for the Bay of Pigs invasion was Operation Zapata. In 1981, all Security and Exchange Commission filings, that's the SEC that we hear about all the time, for Zapata offshore between 1960 and 1966 were destroyed. In other words, the year that Bush became vice president, important records detailing his years at his own drilling company disappeared. Why would that be? In 1969, he bought another company that had CIA connections. The point they're making there is just that there is myriad points of evidence through which we see strong ties to the CIA. It's not like a one-off where maybe he was the one critical business that could get into Cuba, and so he was willing as an honorable American businessman to let his business for a moment be used as a means by which they could learn something about the Cuban government or something like that. This isn't a one-off. This is a potentially decade-long connection between Bush, the CIA, and anti-Cuban efforts. De Mohrenschildt also provided intel to military intelligence in San Antonio, Texas. This is the same military group, the 112th MiG, that's the military intelligence group, that provided information, intelligence about the Lee Oswald, Alex Heidel connection the afternoon of the assassination. 2 months before the assassination of President Kennedy, James Southwood, a U.S. military intelligence veteran, received a very important assignment to provide all documentation possible on Lee Harvey Oswald, aka Harvey Lee Oswald, and Alec James Heidel. The request also sought, so we're talking about one request that requested any information you can find about Lee Harvey Oswald or Harvey Lee Oswald or Alec James Heidel. So it's implying any of those names might be used. And that request also sought, quote, all information on Jean and George de Mohrenschildt. So the same request to an intelligence veteran 2 months before the assassination requested all information you have on Harvey Lee Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, Alec James Heidel, and also anything you have on Jean and George de Mohrenschildt. There's a clear connection there, not just between the two entities, but what they mean, that there's something else going on. We want to know anything you have on those three aliases and also these two individuals, and that's a package request. As Southwood explained it, all the information I had about Oswald had been given to the 112th by George de Mohrenschildt. So he's saying the reason I had any information about Oswald was because George, who I'm also being requested to provide information about, had already given it to the 112th and they had given it to me. So everything I had came from the source of one of the people I'm supposed to be reporting about. We researched this case in detail. So these authors, who are Richard Belzer and David Wayne, they're saying we researched it in detail and we found 3 highly relevant tracks of information that have been completely ignored. So these are the 3 that they identified. Number 1, CIA agent Hugh Huggins did special work for the Kennedys. We paid close attention to his revelations about the little visit he paid to de Mohrenschildt right after the assassination of President Kennedy and at the specific direction of Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Interesting. So I actually have that book here, and I am thinking about, that was one of the chapters that I had actually identified as a name I didn't recognize, the Hugh Huggins. It's a chapter in here. We may go through it because of this de Mohrenschildt connection. The second key thread that they found was that de Mohrenschildt's close friend, Willem Altmans, revealed that de Mohrenschildt admitted to him in detail that he had been the go-between for the assassination between, listen who he mentions, big Texas oil millionaires, unhappy CIA agents, and Lee Harvey Oswald. And then the third thread that they say has not been publicized through the media is that a tape recording was made of the killing, meaning the killing of George de Mohrenschildt. So, taking them one at a time, here's a quick outline of what Hugh Huggins had to say. This was a CIA agent who had been used by the Kennedy brothers for very special assignments. Number one, he said he knew, so this is Huggins, the CIA agent that was used by the Kennedy brothers from time to time. Number one, he said he knew that George de Mohrenschildt was a veteran CIA contract agent. Number two, that Huggins obtained information by a variety of methods, which apparently included breaking two of George de Mohrenschildt's fingers to inspire the level of cooperation that he demanded. So we have another finger issue. We've talked about Lee Bowers having his finger removed, apparently. Now we have George de Mohrenschildt's fingers being broken. Number three was that Huggins concluded that planning and organization for the assassination were clearly performed by George de Mohrenschildt and David Ferrie, both of whom were veteran CIA agents, and that George de Mohrenschildt was actually present in Dallas on the day of the assassination, even though his alibi states otherwise. Now, apparently this is all in this book, so this is making me want to go ahead and read it. Maybe we will do that. Maybe we'll do that next. Maybe this will be a two-parter on George de Mohrenschildt. And then Huggins stated further that the death of George de Mohrenschildt by shotgun was actually a murder, not him taking himself out. I have to use that word, I'll remind you, because YouTube dings us if we use the other word. So sometimes I silence the actual word if I say it in a video, and then sometimes I just use other euphemisms for it. But for some reason, that's a topic that they've decided they will take down your video, they will put a strike on your channel, they'll do all sorts of things for that word. So I'm careful around a couple of words, and that's one of them. Few have dared to venture into the realm of de Mohrenschildt's affiliation with the CIA and his involvement in the assassination. This friend, Willem Altmans, clearly implied a link. What he said was startling, and that de Mohrenschildt had confessed to being involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Altmans claimed that de Mohrenschildt had admitted serving as a middleman between Lee Harvey Oswald and H.L. Hunt in an assassination plot involving other Texas oilmen, anti-Castro Cubans, and elements of the FBI and the CIA. Something interesting that I just saw, they actually have the visual letter, was a letter from Lee Oswald to a Mr. Hunt, just a few weeks, I believe, less than 2 months before the assassination, asking for more information and that no action be taken until the two of them can talk about whatever it is. And so, is it H.L. Hunt? That's the question. Is it the oil man Hunt, or is it the Hunt who's involved in espionage like Watergate, and also, oddly, Chappaquiddick? Which Hunt is it? He just says Mr. Hunt. But this friend, Altmans, is saying that the connection is between Lee Oswald and H.L. Hunt. De Mohrenschildt apparently said this: I am responsible. I feel responsible for the behavior of Lee Harvey Oswald because I guided him. I instructed him to set it up. That's a pretty big bombshell. On March 29th, de Mohrenschildt, so this is March 29th, 1977. This is the day that he would later be gone, be dead. On March 29th, de Mohrenschildt gave an interview to author Edward J. Epstein. I have his book down there about Lee Oswald. He claimed in that interview that in 1962, Dallas CIA operative J. Walton Moore had given him the go-ahead to meet Oswald. I would never have contacted Oswald in a million years if Moore had not sanctioned it, de Mohrenschildt said. Too much was at stake. Here, I just want to let you know that actually I have been listening to, there is an over 5-hour long series of tapes of George de Mohrenschildt talking that you can listen to. Now, I do want to kind of let you know that it's not a huge smoking gun. My perception of it is that it is his sanitized story of how everything happened. It seems to me that either it's the notes that he took for his book that was publicized, and then that later it sounds like he regretted publishing about Lee Oswald. But then I will say there are some interesting things that are too specific to be completely made up. So I think there are things to be learned. If you have a huge interest in de Mohrenschildt, you can hear his own voice. You can hear him conversing with the man who's taking notes. It's clear that one of them is prodding, that the interviewer is kind of prodding him, and George de Mohrenschildt is reading from his notes and going back, and you can hear the papers rustling, and he'll say, oh, I skipped over that part, and the other man will prod him like, go ahead and read what you wrote. It's very interesting. It gives a little look into his thinking. It gives a little look into his experiences, but I would just caution that I don't know how much of it is true versus posturing, especially based on what we know about his connections with the CIA, that it very well could be an additional part of the cover story that he's trying to craft. But there is that, and it's fascinating. Well, I think we're going to go ahead, and what we're going to do is, I think for part 2, we will look at this book and the Hugh Huggins connection and read whatever we can about George de Mohrenschildt. So this gives us a little look of why he is significant, why we want to lean in and pay attention. For me, the connection to Bush and to Jackie is very suspicious. The thing we haven't talked about yet is that he actually is the person who introduced Ruth and Michael Paine to Lee and Marina Oswald. And we have all observed the odd ways that that relationship was carried out, but also the odd connections that Ruth had in the case and the way she kind of keeps finding evidence. We note that according to Jim Garrison, Michael and Ruth Paine's tax returns were all classified, and also that the Secret Service agents who were guarding Marina after the assassination told her not to trust Ruth Paine because she was CIA. So George de Mohrenschildt is the one who connected Lee and Marina Oswald with Michael and Ruth Paine, and he sort of is hugely influential in Lee and Marina's life, and then sort of they have this party, and suddenly he moves away from Dallas, and Michael and Ruth Paine take the central stage in their lives. And it's believed that there was a handoff, that he was the babysitter, and that he handed their responsibility off to Michael and Ruth Paine. But next time, come back, we will get into JFK Breaking the Silence by Bill Sloan and look at this Hugh Huggins, a CIA agent who was used by the Kennedy brothers for special assignments, who apparently went on the record with someone talking about George de Mohrenschildt. So we will look at that, and then we will come back and finish up the question of what happened to cause a downfall for George de Mohrenschildt? How did he have such a decline from being a significant, successful businessman in the Russian community? It's actually called the White Russian community, which some people ask about, like, are you saying like white Russians? Like, aren't all Russians white? It's actually a specific political / cultural movement that was called the White Russian movement. So he was a part of that. It has to do with the Tsarists and Trotskyites and things like that. So it's a political movement that identified a collective group that self-identified that way as the White Russians. He was also a successful businessman who had done land deals and oil deals in various countries. And then also he was reportedly a connection between Lee Oswald and big oil here in Texas. So come back for how did he go from a successful businessman with his feet in all sorts of different deals and plots and plans, and a successful, wealthy man, to the decline where his life was taken. So come back for that. I look forward to the comment section with you guys. I feel like when I was on vacation, I was kind of scrambling when I got back to even having service, because we went backpacking, where I just felt like, I wasn't able to interact with you guys in the same way that I normally do. And I missed it because I enjoy that real-time feedback and the way that I learn from you guys too. It's not at all a relationship here where I'm the professor and you guys are, the students sitting back. I know some of you feel that way because you feel like you're gaining your sea legs in the case. But the truth is that we are all learning together, and I learn things all the time in that comment section. People put in book recommendations, and here's an article, and did you hear this audio, and I wonder what you think about this detail, and it might be a detail that I've never heard about. So I love that about the comment section. I appreciate that about the comment section, and I hope that you guys are taking advantage of all the learning that can happen there. Remember to check the show notes. I will put these books here, as well as JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas. You can look for all of those in the show notes, and I will see you back next time for the continuation of our series on George de Mohrenschildt. Have a great day.